I signed the wrong transfer papers and woke on the alien Warlord's flagship. Then her officers began to salute me. How could one mistaken signature put a human aboard an alien Warlord's flagship? And why would her officers suddenly begin saluting someone who never expected to be there? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Before we begin, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another journey beyond the stars. Thank you for watching, for staying with us, and for continuing to support the stories we share. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? Settle in, get comfortable, and let everything else fade away for a while. Let's begin the story. Why is everyone saluting me? Daniel Mercer whispered, and the alien officer standing beside his recovery pod somehow became even more formal. Daniel had awakened 30 seconds earlier beneath a ceiling he did not recognize, breathing air that smelled faintly of ozone, cold metal, and something sharp like winter after a thunderstorm. The room was spotless. Too spotless. Dark silver walls curved around 6 empty transit pods, each surrounded by thin lines of blue light. His stomach felt slightly wrong. Gravity, he realized, maybe 4% lighter than Earth standard. Definitely not Transport 47. The officer facing him was Karate, tall and broad-shouldered, with deep blue skin and a charcoal uniform marked by 3 silver bars. Daniel knew enough interspecies protocol to recognize rank. He also knew enough to recognize when someone was treating a systems engineer like an admiral. "Sir," the officer said, "your belongings have been transferred to guest quarters." Daniel blinked. "Guest quarters?" The officer saluted again. "Yes, sir. Could you stop doing that?" The officer's expression tightened with immediate concern. "Have I performed the acknowledgement incorrectly?" "No. I mean, probably not. I just do not know why you are acknowledging me at all." The officer seemed genuinely confused by the question. Daniel swung his feet onto the floor. He was still wearing the gray transit clothes issued at Meridian Transfer Station. Yesterday, after 14 hours reviewing coolant efficiency reports, he had signed a stack of digital forms while a Terran clerk explained 3 different transfer schedules at once. Daniel remembered asking which line needed his signature. He remembered the clerk pointing. He remembered signing. After that came the transit pod, sedation, darkness. He had expected to wake aboard a civilian logistics carrier headed for the Caldress engineering yard. Instead, the door opened onto a corridor wide enough to drive a truck through. Daniel stepped outside. 2 more karate officers approached. Both stopped. Both saluted. Daniel looked behind himself. Nobody there. "Okay," he murmured. "That is becoming a pattern." He walked farther. The ship hummed beneath his feet with the deep, nearly subsonic vibration of enormous fusion systems. This was no transport. Maintenance drones moved along ceiling rails. Armored pressure doors divided the corridor every 100 feet. Through transparent wall panels, Daniel glimpsed bundled power conduits thicker than his torso. Whoever had built this vessel had expected it to operate for decades without returning home. A young officer rounded the corner carrying a data tablet. She saw Daniel, stopped so quickly the tablet nearly slipped from her hands, then saluted. Daniel raised one hand awkwardly. "Hi." Her golden eyes widened. "Good cycle, bearer." Daniel stopped. "Bearer of what?" The officer looked horrified, as though answering might itself violate some regulation. "I should summon protocol command. Please summon somebody who understands paperwork." She hurried away. Daniel continued until the corridor opened into an observation gallery. Then he forgot about the salutes. Beyond a window nearly 50 feet high stretched a field of stars crowded with ships. Not freighters. Warships. Dozens of them moved in disciplined formation around the vessel beneath his feet. Daniel approached the glass slowly. A holographic identification strip illuminated along the railing as his presence triggered the display. The translation appeared in English. Karate First War Fleet. Flagship Sovereign Spear. Daniel stared at the words. Somewhere behind him, another set of boots stopped. Another salute followed. He closed his eyes and remembered the bored Terran clerk, the stack of transfer forms, and the signature he had placed without reading the alien language column beside it. Daniel opened his eyes again and looked out at the fleet. "What the hell did I sign?" The officer who finally came for Daniel did not salute immediately. That was the first encouraging thing to happen since he woke up. She was karate, slightly shorter than the others, with pale blue skin and a dark uniform carrying a narrow band of copper at the collar. She stopped 6 feet away, studied him with obvious professional caution, then lowered her head by perhaps half an inch. Daniel noticed 3 officers farther down the corridor watching the exchange. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "Warlord Voss requests your presence on the command bridge." Daniel pointed toward himself. "Daniel Mercer? Terran Systems Engineer? Employee number 4729. Her expression did not change. "Yes." "Good. I wanted to establish that before somebody gives me a fleet." The officer appeared uncertain whether he was joking. "Please follow me." They entered a lift that accelerated so smoothly Daniel only noticed movement when the floor indicator began climbing. "Can you tell me why everyone keeps saluting?" he asked. "It would be inappropriate for me to interpret your station." "I do not have a station." The officer looked straight ahead. "That statement itself may constitute a formal declaration." Daniel stared at her. "Then I officially declare that I am going to stop talking until someone explains the rules." Her eyes widened. Daniel sighed. That was not a declaration. The lift doors opened before the situation could become worse. The bridge of the Sovereign Spear stretched nearly 200 feet beneath a vaulted ceiling filled with tactical light. Circular workstations descended toward a central command platform. Hundreds of symbols moved across suspended holographic displays. Daniel recognized navigation telemetry, reactor output, fleet positioning, communications traffic. What he did not recognize was the reaction to his arrival. Conversations stopped. Officers stood. Then, in perfect sequence, nearly every karate on the bridge saluted. Daniel froze beside the lift. "Oh, come on." One person did not move. She stood at the center of the command platform with both hands behind her back. Warlord Sailor Voss was impossible to mistake for anyone else. Nearly 6 feet 8 inches tall, deep teal skin, silver-black hair secured behind her shoulders, golden eyes fixed directly on Daniel. Her uniform was black with restrained silver markings. No decorative excess. No unnecessary movement. She did not salute him. Daniel found that strangely comforting. "Daniel Mercer," she said. "Come forward." He walked down the central aisle while officers returned to their stations. Every step felt louder than it should have. Sailor waited until he reached the platform, then touched a control. A document appeared between them. Daniel recognized the Terran transfer form immediately. His signature glowed near the bottom. "You signed this at Meridian Transfer Station?" she asked. "Yesterday afternoon." "Willingly. I signed about 12 things yesterday." Something changed behind her eyes. Very small. Very controlled. That was not the answer I hoped for. Daniel leaned toward the hologram. "I was supposed to transfer to Civilian Logistics Carrier 47, Berth 18, Engineering Section." Sailora enlarged the document. 2 columns appeared. English on the left. Karate script on the right. "Your administration recently adopted shared transfer documentation to simplify personnel exchanges." That sounds exactly like the kind of idea that creates meetings about simplifying meetings. She ignored that. "Where were you instructed to sign?" Daniel pointed. "There." Sailora looked at the line, then at him. That field does not mean the same thing in karate military law. Daniel felt the bridge become very quiet again. "What does it mean?" Sailora dismissed the document and stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Before I answer, understand this. Until the matter is legally reviewed, every officer aboard this vessel is required to recognize what you accepted, which is..." For the first time, Daniel saw something approaching disbelief on the warlord's face. "An authority my people have not granted to an outsider in 143 years." Daniel looked around the bridge. Several officers immediately looked away. He turned back to Sailora. "I am going to need a slightly more specific explanation than that." Her golden eyes held his. "Yes, Mr. Mercer." She restored the document between them and highlighted the line above his signature. "I believe you are." Sailora enlarged the highlighted line until the karate symbols floated between them like pieces of silver machinery. Daniel could read the English translation beside them. "Transfer accepted. Personnel reassigned under receiving authority. Completely ordinary." Sailora touched the karate column. A second translation appeared. "Bearer of the Warlord's burden." Daniel read it twice. "That seems like a fairly significant translation problem." "It is not a translation problem," Sailora said. "It is a legal equivalence problem." "That sounds more expensive." No one on the bridge reacted. Daniel was beginning to suspect karate military education did not include humor. Sailora folded her hands behind her back. The title predates our modern fleet. When a warlord held absolute command, one person was appointed to carry responsibility outside the normal hierarchy. Daniel glanced around. What kind of responsibility? The authority to challenge me. That got his attention. Challenge you how? If you believe one of my command decisions places the crew at unnecessary risk, you may invoke the burden. And then, I must stop the decision and hear your objection before proceeding. Daniel stared at her. You are telling me that because I signed the wrong line, I can interrupt the commander of this entire fleet? Correct. That is insane. Several officers visibly stiffened. Sailora remained still. Under karate law, questioning the wisdom of an ancient institution while holding that institution's authority is permitted. Daniel rubbed his forehead. Good. I would hate to commit paperwork treason. Sailora's mouth moved almost imperceptibly. He could not tell whether she was annoyed or suppressing something dangerously close to amusement. The salute is not recognition of military rank, she continued. It acknowledges the burden you carry for those serving beneath command authority. Daniel looked toward the officers at their stations. Suddenly the salutes felt heavier. I do not want that authority. Want is irrelevant. That is usually what people say right before paperwork becomes a nightmare. On that point, our cultures agree. Daniel looked back at the document. Then cancel it. We cannot. You have a flagship with enough computing power to navigate folded space, but nobody can delete one signature? Deleting it would not erase the legal act. Sailora brought up a navigation display. Their fleet was moving toward a neutral installation marked Arbitration Station Helios. Formal revocation requires an independent karate adjudicator. We arrive in 36 hours. Daniel exhaled slowly. So for 36 hours, everyone salutes me. Yes. And I can challenge your decisions. Yes. I promise not to. That finally produced a reaction. Sailora's golden eyes narrowed. Do not make promises before understanding why the authority exists. Daniel met her gaze. I am a systems engineer. I troubleshoot coolant loops and power distribution. I am not qualified to second-guess a warlord. Perhaps. She dismissed the legal display. Until adjudication, you will observe bridge operations. You will not issue routine commands. If someone requests your judgment outside the burden's legal scope, refer them to me. That sounds manageable. And there is one word you must use carefully. Daniel already knew which one. Challenge. The bridge seemed to become quieter merely hearing it. Sailora nodded. Once spoken as a formal command objection, I am legally required to halt the disputed action. Daniel raised both hands. Then I am officially retiring that word from my vocabulary. Sailora turned toward the main tactical display. We shall see. Daniel followed her gaze. The Sovereign Spear moved through space, surrounded by dozens of precisely aligned ships. Everything looked controlled, efficient, almost impossibly orderly. Then a warning tone sounded from an engineering station. A young karate technician looked down at her console. Her expression tightened. Coolant manifold temperature variance, she reported. A senior officer answered without looking at her. Within protocol tolerance. Continue standard cycle. The technician hesitated. Her fingers remained above the controls. Daniel noticed. Nobody else seemed to. Officer, Sailora said, continue. The technician lowered her eyes. Yes, Warlord. Daniel looked at the temperature graph. Then at the technician. Then at Sailora. He had promised himself he would not interfere. He had held that promise for exactly 4 minutes. Daniel watched the coolant graph climb another 2 degrees. The change was small, almost polite, the kind of number a computer could bury beneath green status indicators and an officer could dismiss with one sentence. The young technician did not dismiss it. Her golden eyes kept returning to the same curve. Daniel knew that look. He had worn it himself in engineering rooms when a machine was technically behaving and every instinct said it was about to become somebody's problem. What is your name? He asked. The technician looked up. Systems Specialist Terrain, Bearer. What are you seeing, Specialist Terrain? Her eyes flicked toward the senior engineering officer. The variance remains within approved tolerance. Daniel waited. That was not what I asked. The bridge became quieter. Terrain swallowed. The temperature is rising against expected flow behavior. The primary manifold is stable, but return pressure is decreasing by 0.7% per cycle. Daniel stepped closer to her display, meaning, There may be restricted circulation in the secondary return. The senior officer finally turned. The diagnostic system reports no obstruction. Tareen lowered her gaze. Yes, Commander. Daniel looked at Sailora. She stood motionless on the command platform, watching him now. He remembered his promise. 36 hours. Observe. Stay out of the way. Do not say the dangerous word. The temperature rose another degree. Daniel sighed. Challenge. Every sound on the bridge seemed to disappear except the ventilation system. The senior officer stared at him. Tareen stopped breathing for a second. Sailora's expression revealed nothing. Command action suspended, she said. State your objection. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. I do not have one. That caused more reaction than the challenge itself. Several officers turned toward him. Sailora's golden eyes narrowed. You invoked the burden without an alternative? I invoked it because she has one. Daniel pointed toward Tareen. The young technician looked as if she wanted the deck to open beneath her boots. Sailora followed his gesture. Specialist Tareen. Present your recommendation. Tareen hesitated. Warlord, protocol requires confirmation from senior engineering before modifying coolant distribution. Protocol is currently suspended. Tareen looked at Daniel. He gave her a small nod. What would you do if nobody outranked you for the next 5 minutes? He asked. She stared at the graph. When she answered, her voice was steadier. Reduce reactor load by 3%. Redirect secondary coolant through reserve loop 2. Then pulse the return valves independently and compare pressure recovery. Daniel looked at Sailora. Is that dangerous? No, Sailora said. I was asking engineering. The senior officer stiffened. Tareen almost smiled. Almost. No, bearer. It is within safe operating limits. Daniel stepped back. Then I am done. Sailora considered Tareen for 2 long seconds. Proceed. The technician moved immediately. Reactor output decreased. Blue indicators shifted across the engineering display. Reserve loop 2 activated with a low mechanical hum Daniel could feel through the deck. For 10 seconds, nothing changed. Then return pressure jumped upward. A warning symbol appeared on the secondary manifold. Tareen isolated the section. The temperature curve flattened. There, she whispered. Flow restriction confirmed. The senior officer leaned toward his display. The automated diagnostic missed it. Because the restriction was intermittent, Daniel said. The computer was averaging the return pressure. Tareen looked at him with surprise. Daniel shrugged. Terran systems make the same mistake. Sailora approached the engineering station. How long before this would have exceeded tolerance? Tareen checked the projection. Approximately 2 hours. And after that, the system would have reduced reactor efficiency automatically. Nothing catastrophic. No dramatic disaster. Just a flagship losing power because one technician had noticed something before the software did, and nobody had asked what she thought. Sailora looked across her bridge. Challenge resolved. Specialist Tareen's procedure is approved. The officers returned to work, but the room did not feel the same. Daniel noticed several of them glancing toward Tareen. Tareen noticed too. Sailora stopped beside Daniel. You challenged my command without knowing the solution. Correct. That is considered irresponsible in karate doctrine. On Earth, we call it asking the person who knows. Sailora studied him for a moment. You assumed she knew more than her superior. No. Daniel looked toward Tareen's station. I noticed she knew something nobody was letting her say. Sailora followed his gaze. The bridge hummed around them, precise and disciplined as before. Yet for the first time, she seemed to be listening to something beneath that precision. Daniel had used the most dangerous word on the ship, and the strange part was not that it had stopped a warlord's order. It was that one quiet technician had finally been allowed to finish a sentence. For the next 40 minutes, Daniel said almost nothing. That turned out to be more educational than talking. He stood near the rear engineering stations while the Sovereign Spear continued toward Arbitration Station Helios, listening to the rhythm of the bridge. Reports moved upward. Orders moved downward. Nothing moved sideways. Navigation spoke to senior navigation. Engineering spoke to senior engineering. Sensor analysis submitted findings through 2 supervisory levels before anything reached Sailora. The system was disciplined, precise, and painfully slow whenever reality refused to match procedure. Daniel began noticing something else. Every station was staffed by people who clearly understood their jobs. They simply waited for permission to use that understanding. A navigation specialist detected a tiny drift in their formation and quietly prepared a correction. Her supervisor issued the same correction 90 seconds later. A power technician noticed an inefficient load balance and waited until his section commander requested a review. Daniel leaned toward him. "You already knew, did you not?" The technician looked uncomfortable. "I suspected, bearer." "What would you have done?" "Shifted auxiliary fabrication to the port distribution bus." "Then why did you wait?" The technician glanced toward his superior. Daniel understood before the answer came. Authorization hierarchy. Saylora's voice sounded behind him. Daniel turned. She had approached without ceremony, hands folded behind her back. "Our hierarchy prevents conflicting decisions. It also prevents useful ones." Her golden eyes narrowed slightly. "You have been aboard my vessel less than 2 hours, and I have spent most of that time being saluted by people who know more than I do. You find that uncomfortable?" "Extremely." Daniel nodded toward the power technician. "Ask him what he would change." Sailora looked at the technician. "Answer." His posture became rigid. "I would move auxiliary fabrication to the port distribution bus, Warlord. It would reduce starboard thermal load by approximately 4%. Sailora checked the display. "Why was this not reported?" "The variance remains within protocol." Daniel gave her a look. Sailora noticed. "Do not say it." "I was not going to." "You were thinking it loudly." Daniel almost smiled. Sailora authorized the adjustment. The power graph smoothed within seconds. Nothing dramatic happened. No alarms. No applause. The ship simply became slightly more efficient because someone had finally been asked a question. Daniel spent the next hour doing the same thing. He did not issue orders. He asked, "What do you think? What would you change? Who understands this system best?" At first, officers answered cautiously. Then their responses became faster. A sensor specialist suggested combining 2 passive arrays instead of waiting for central analysis. A flight controller recommended a minor formation change that reduced correction burns across 3 escort vessels. A maintenance coordinator reorganized a scheduled inspection after Daniel asked why 6 technicians were waiting for 1 supervisor. Sailora watched all of it. By the 3rd hour, the bridge sounded different. Not louder, less hesitant. Daniel stood beside the main engineering display, drinking something the galley insisted was coffee. It was hot and brown, which was where the resemblance ended. Sailora joined him. "You have altered the behavior of 17 officers without giving a single command." "I ask questions. That is precisely what concerns me." Daniel looked at her. "Your people are good. I am aware. Then why make them prove it by waiting?" Sailora studied the bridge. "Because independent authority creates uncertainty. So does space." She looked back at him. Daniel set down the cup. "You built a ship full of specialists, then trained them to become quiet whenever somebody with more stripes walks into the room." For once, Sailora had no immediate answer. A soft navigation tone interrupted them. One of the younger officers leaned toward her display. "Warlord, I am detecting a gravitational irregularity ahead." Her supervisor checked his own console. "Central navigation shows the corridor clear." The young officer remained focused. "The distortion is increasing." Daniel saw her hesitate. Then, instead of falling silent, she turned directly toward Sailora. "I recommend an immediate independent scan." Sailora looked at Daniel for half a second. "Granted." The scan began. 30 seconds later, the main navigation display changed from blue to amber. A vast gravitational shear appeared directly across their projected route. The bridge became still. Estimated contact time appeared above the central display. 9 minutes. Daniel stared at the number. Sailora did not look at him this time. She looked at her officers. Options. 3 people began answering at once. 3 voices became 6. Navigation proposed a 12-degree port correction. Flight control rejected it because the escort formation could not match the turn quickly enough. Engineering warned that a harder maneuver would push the main drive beyond recommended thermal margins. Sensor analysis reported that the gravitational shear was changing shape faster than the central computer could model it. Above them, the countdown dropped from 8 minutes, 42 seconds to 8 minutes, 38. Daniel watched information pour into the command network and come back out as hesitation. Sailora stood at the center of it, perfectly still. Navigation, calculate the safest fleet vector. Working, Warlord. Engineering, determine maximum sustainable drive output. Working. Sensors, update the shear boundary. Working. Every department was working. Nobody was deciding. Daniel moved toward the navigation display. The anomaly looked like a pale amber river stretching across their route, its edges twisting as nearby gravitational fields pulled against one another. "Can we stop?" he asked. The senior flight officer shook his head. "Not within safe deceleration distance. Go around. Not as a unified formation." Daniel looked at the escort markers surrounding the Sovereign Spear. 31 vessels. Different masses. Different engines. Different turning limits. The central computer was trying to create one perfect answer for all of them. That was the problem. Why do they all need the same vector? Daniel asked. The officer stared at him. Fleet cohesion doctrine. That was not what I asked. Sailora turned toward Daniel. She understood before anyone else did. You want to break formation. I want each ship to stop pretending it is the same ship. A navigation commander objected immediately. Independent routing would create dozens of variables. Daniel nodded. You already have dozens of variables. The countdown reached 7 minutes, 11 seconds. Sailora looked across her bridge. If we decentralize navigation, each vessel will calculate from local sensor data, which is fresher than whatever reaches this bridge after passing through the fleet network. Daniel pointed toward the officers around them. Your captains know their ships. Your engineers know their limits. Let them use that. Fleet doctrine requires coordinated command authorization. Then authorize them. Silence settled across the bridge. Sailora's eyes remained on the anomaly. Daniel could almost see years of training pulling against the evidence in front of her. One command structure. One decision. One fleet. It had worked because predictability rewarded control. Space had just become unpredictable. The central computer chimed. Unified solution unavailable within current confidence threshold. 5 minutes, 54 seconds. Daniel inhaled slowly. He had promised not to use the word casually. This was not casual. Challenge. Every officer stopped. Sailora turned toward him. State your objection. Daniel looked around the bridge. My objection is that everyone here is waiting for you. No one moved. Navigation already knows what it can do. Engineering knows what the drives can tolerate. Sensors know what they can see. The captains know their own vessels. But every answer keeps traveling up here, so one person can approve it. Sailora's expression remained controlled. State your alternative. Daniel faced the main display. For the next 6 minutes, nobody waits for permission to do the job they were trained to do. A quiet ripple moved through the bridge. One senior officer looked genuinely alarmed. Bearer, that would suspend normal command sequencing. Exactly. Daniel looked at Sailora. You said independent authority creates uncertainty. Right now uncertainty is already here. For minutes, 58 seconds. Sailora glanced at the 31 ship markers, then at her officers. If I grant this, you understand the burden makes you responsible for the objection. Daniel nodded. I understand. And if your judgment is wrong, then it is wrong. But at least it will not be late. The countdown reached 4 minutes, 43 seconds. Sailora closed her eyes for one heartbeat. When she opened them, something in her posture had changed. Challenge granted. Nobody moved. Sailora raised her voice. You heard the bearer. Independent operational authority is authorized until we clear the shear. Captains control their own vectors. Department specialists act within certified limits. Do not wait for this bridge. The transformation was immediate. Navigation split the fleet display into individual routes. Engineering transmitted vessel-specific thermal margins. Sensor teams opened direct data channels instead of routing everything through command. Escort ships began separating into smaller groups. The bridge filled with voices, but the sound was no longer confusion. It was work. Daniel stepped backward. Sailora looked at him. You surrendered centralized command during a navigation crisis. Daniel watched the first ships alter course. No. The Sovereign Spear began turning beneath their feet, smooth and deliberate. I gave it back to the people who already knew what to do. The Sovereign Spear turned first, but not because Sailora ordered it to. The navigation team chose the vector. Engineering approved the thermal load. Flight control committed the maneuver. 3 decisions, made by 3 groups, completed in less time than a single recommendation had taken to reach the command platform 10 minutes earlier. Daniel felt the deck tilt almost imperceptibly beneath his boots as artificial gravity compensated. Around the flagship, 31 vessels separated from their perfect formation and became something messier, something alive. Escort 7 requests direct sensor sharing with Escort 12, a specialist called. Sailora answered by instinct. Apro, she stopped herself. The specialist looked toward her. Sailora lowered her hand. You have operational authority. The specialist blinked once, then turned back. Direct link established. Daniel noticed the moment. So did Sailora. The countdown fell below 3 minutes. Amber routes multiplied across the main display. Some ships climbed above the gravitational shear. Others dropped beneath it. Smaller vessels accelerated through narrow regions where the distortion was weakest. The fleet no longer looked like a military diagram. It looked like water finding paths around stone. Local shear increasing along our starboard vector. Terrain reported from engineering. Nobody told her to continue. I recommend shifting 8% of reserve power to maneuvering control. The senior engineering officer checked her numbers. Within thermal limits. Terrain made the adjustment. Daniel looked at Sailora. Nobody exploded. Her golden eyes stayed on the display. Your humor remains poorly timed. That was almost a joke. Do not become ambitious. 1 minute, 40 seconds. The sovereign spear entered the outer edge of the anomaly. A low vibration passed through the deck. Stars beyond the forward display appeared to stretch slightly, then settle. Sensor readings changed faster than the central processor could predict them. This time, nobody waited for prediction. Navigation corrected by local measurement. Flight control responded. Engineering adjusted power. Each department moved as soon as its own information became useful. Daniel did nothing. That was the strangest part. He stood beside the warlord of the First Fleet and watched people solve their own problems. Port deviation 0.4 degrees. Navigation reported. Correcting. Drive temperature rising 2%. Engineering answered. Compensating. Clear corridor opening ahead. Sensors called. Sending coordinates directly to flight. Sailora remained silent. Daniel wondered whether silence had ever required this much discipline from her. 20 seconds. The flagship crossed the strongest region of distortion. The deck vibration deepened, then faded. 11 seconds. For escort vessels cleared on independent vectors. 7 seconds. The final heavy cruiser reported stable navigation. 3 seconds. The countdown vanished. For a heartbeat, nobody spoke. Then the main display changed from amber to blue. All 31 vessels remained active. Their formation was scattered across thousands of miles, untidy and completely safe. The bridge did not cheer. Karate officers apparently did not do that either. Instead came the soft sounds of breathing, consoles, cooling fans, and dozens of people realizing they had just acted without waiting for permission. Sailora looked across them. Status. Reports came immediately. Navigation stable. Reactor stable. Fleet communications stable. No vessel required emergency assistance. Daniel picked up his terrible imitation of coffee and discovered it had gone cold. Tragic, he murmured. Sailora glanced at the cup. Your beverage. Beyond recovery. I was referring to the fleet. The fleet looks fine. Sailora turned toward him fully. You surrendered command. Daniel shook his head. No. I distributed it. Her expression changed. Not agreement. Not yet. Something quieter. Karate doctrine teaches that authority must remain visible or discipline collapses. Daniel looked around the bridge. Terrain was already reviewing coolant performance with her senior officer. Navigation specialists compared their independent routes. Nobody looked less disciplined. They looked more awake. Maybe authority does not disappear when you share it, Daniel said. Maybe responsibility just gets closer to the person who can actually do something. Sailora considered that in silence. Then the young navigation officer who had first detected the anomaly approached the command platform. She looked at Sailora, then at Daniel. She saluted him. This time Daniel understood enough not to wave awkwardly. Bearer, she said, fleet navigation requests permission to retain direct specialist communication during formation recovery. Daniel almost answered. Then he stopped. He looked at Sailora. The choice belonged to her now. Sailora noticed. For several seconds, Warlord and human said nothing. Then she turned to the officer. Permission granted. The officer returned to her station. Sailora watched her go. You could have invoked your authority. I could have. You did not. Daniel set the cold cup aside. You already heard her. Sailora looked across the bridge she had commanded for years. The same officers stood at the same stations beneath the same blue light. Yet something fundamental had shifted without a single piece of machinery changing. 33 hours until arbitration station Helios, she said quietly. Daniel nodded. Plenty of time to fix my paperwork. Saylora's golden eyes remained on her crew. I am beginning to suspect the paperwork is the least complicated thing you brought aboard. For the next 33 hours, nobody aboard the Sovereign Spear mentioned the gravitational shear as a victory. The karate seemed suspicious of that word. They called it a navigation event, filed reports, recalculated fuel consumption, and returned the fleet to formation. Yet Daniel could hear the difference. Engineering specialists spoke directly to navigation when power requirements changed. Sensor officers shared uncertain readings before supervisors requested them. Junior technicians offered recommendations with fewer apologies attached. The ship had not become disorderly. It had become conversational. Daniel spent most of the next day observing from an auxiliary engineering station, where Tareen showed him the coolant manifold that had started everything. The restriction was mineral accumulation inside a return valve, she explained. The automated diagnostic has been modified. Good. Commander Ress also requested that junior specialists report pattern concerns directly. Daniel looked toward the senior engineering officer across the room. Did he? Tareen nodded. He said waiting for certainty is sometimes another way of waiting too long. Daniel smiled. Sounds suspiciously human. He would consider that an insult. Give him a week. Later, Sailora found Daniel alone in the observation gallery. The fleet moved beyond the glass, stars sliding slowly across the black. Arbitration Station Helios was visible ahead as a silver point surrounded by docking lights. We arrive in 53 minutes, she said. Daniel leaned against the railing. And then I become an ordinary systems engineer again. You say that as though you have been extraordinary here. I signed the wrong box. Yes, spectacularly. Daniel looked at her. Was that humor? Do not become ambitious. He laughed quietly. For several seconds, neither spoke. The flagship's engines produced a faint vibration through the railing. Sailora watched her ships. The burden was created 8 centuries ago, she said. Warlords once traveled months beyond communication range. Absolute authority was considered necessary. Someone had to possess the legal right to stop a commander who had stopped listening. Daniel looked at her, and eventually the position became ceremonial. Mostly, commanders dislike institutional reminders that they may be wrong. Humans solve that problem by creating meetings. Sailora gave him a flat look. Your species is terrifying. Daniel smiled, but her expression soon became serious again. When you invoked the burden during the navigation event, I expected you to replace my decision with your own. I did not have one. Exactly. Sailora turned toward him. You did something our doctrine does not teach. You used authority to create space for other people to act. Daniel shrugged. That is not uniquely human. Perhaps not. But you did it without fearing that their competence would diminish yours. The words stayed between them. Daniel looked through the glass at the fleet. I am not a commander, Sailora. It was the first time he had used her name without title. She noticed, but did not correct him. Maybe that helped. A communication tone sounded overhead. Helios docking control had begun approach procedures. Sailora straightened. There is something you should understand before adjudication. Daniel waited. Once your transfer is revoked, the officers aboard this vessel will no longer be obligated to salute you. That is excellent news. I still have no idea what to do with my hands. You misunderstand. Sailora faced him fully. The salute was never for rank. Karate officers salute the bearer because the bearer accepts responsibility for lives beneath another person's command. Daniel remembered the recovery room. The corridors. Officers stopping as he passed. At the time, the gesture had felt absurd. Now it felt different. So they were saluting the responsibility. Yes. Even when I had no idea what I was doing. Especially then. Daniel frowned. Sailora continued. Authority is easy to carry when you believe you deserve it. The burden exists for someone willing to carry responsibility without claiming ownership of those beneath it. Outside, the fleet began separating for docking approach. One by one, ships moved onto their assigned vectors. No central command ordered the adjustments. Their captains coordinated directly. Sailora watched them with an expression Daniel could not quite name. You changed my flagship, she said. Daniel shook his head. Your people changed it. Because you asked what they thought. Then keep asking. Sailora turned toward him. The docking lights of Helios reflected gold across her eyes. And when the paperwork is corrected? Daniel looked back at the stars. Then you will not need a human logistics engineer accidentally outranking common sense. The corner of her mouth lifted. Systems engineer. Thank you. I have been reading your file. Daniel groaned. That seems unnecessary. It was extremely educational. The intercom announced final docking approach. Sailor started toward the exit, then stopped. Daniel. He looked over. When the officers stop being required to salute you, pay attention to what happens next. She left before he could ask what she meant. Daniel remained beside the window as arbitration station Helios grew brighter ahead. For the first time since waking aboard the Sovereign Spear, he found himself wondering whether correcting the mistake would actually make everything simpler. Arbitration station Helios corrected Daniel Mercer's mistake in 11 minutes. After everything that had happened aboard the Sovereign Spear, the ceremony was almost offensively ordinary. Daniel sat at a narrow desk beneath white lights while a karate adjudicator reviewed the transfer record, confirmed the conflicting legal definitions, and placed a new document before him. Sign here, she said. Daniel studied the line carefully, then the line beneath it, then both translations. The adjudicator waited. I have recently developed trust issues with forms. She did not smile. Daniel signed. A soft tone confirmed the amendment. Just like that, the bearer of the Warlord's burden ceased to exist. No announcement shook the station. No light changed color. Daniel was simply Daniel again. Terran Systems Engineer. Employee number 4729. He should have felt relieved. Mostly he did. 2 hours later, he returned to the Sovereign Spear to collect his belongings before transferring to the civilian carrier that had originally been expecting him. His entire accidental career as a karate authority fit inside one gray travel bag. The first officer he encountered near the docking collar recognized him immediately. Daniel prepared for the strange little hesitation that came when people adjusted to changed rank. Instead, the officer stopped. Then she saluted. Daniel looked behind himself from habit. Empty corridor. You do not have to do that anymore, he said. I know. She lowered her hand and continued walking. Daniel remained still for a second. Then he remembered Sailor's words. Pay attention to what happens next. He walked on. At the engineering junction, Tareen was waiting beside an open diagnostic panel. She saw him and smiled. Mr. Mercer. No bearer. No title. She saluted anyway. Daniel sighed. You too. Especially me. I am beginning to suspect this is organized. Karate officers do not organize unnecessary ceremonial gestures. Daniel glanced down the corridor. That sounds exactly like something people say after organizing unnecessary ceremonial gestures. Tareen's smile widened. She returned to work. Daniel continued toward the docking bay. One officer saluted near navigation. Another beside communications. 2 maintenance specialists stopped together and did the same. None were required to. That was what made each gesture heavier than before. The first salutes had belonged to a document. These did not. Near the central lift, Daniel passed Commander Ress, the senior engineering officer who had once dismissed Tareen's coolant concern. Ress stopped. Daniel expected awkwardness. Instead, the commander saluted. The revised engineering protocol begins next cycle, he said. Junior specialists may now report anomalous patterns directly before automated confirmation. Daniel nodded. Tareen will like that. She already submitted 14 recommendations. You might regret this. I already do. Daniel laughed. The lift carried him toward the docking level. When the doors opened, Sailora stood alone at the far end of the corridor. Beyond her, the airlock waited beneath soft blue lights. Daniel approached slowly. You planned this. I ordered nothing. That is suspiciously specific. You no longer hold karate authority. I could not compel anyone to salute you even if I wished to. Daniel looked back along the corridor. Several officers had stopped at a respectful distance. Then why are they doing it? Sailora regarded him quietly. Because obligation ended at Helios. Daniel understood. Respect had not. He adjusted the strap of his travel bag. For someone who signed the wrong line, I caused a lot of paperwork. You caused considerably more than paperwork. Sailora raised one hand, but she did not salute. Instead, she placed her palm flat against the center of her chest. Daniel had never seen the gesture before. What does that mean, he asked. It is not given to rank. I gathered that. It recognizes an equal in responsibility. Daniel's humor faded. Around them, the flagship hummed softly. Same engines. Same steel. Same officers. Different silence. Daniel returned the gesture as best he could. Sailora gave the smallest approving nod. Your civilian carrier is waiting. This time I am reading every document. A remarkable improvement in human procedure. Daniel turned toward the airlock, then paused. Keep asking them what they think. Sailora looked toward her officers. I intend to. Daniel walked through the docking collar without another ceremony. Behind him, the sovereign spear prepared to depart under a warlord who had learned that command did not become weaker when others were trusted to think. He had arrived because of a signature nobody meant to give him. He left with no title, no authority, and no legal reason for anyone aboard to acknowledge him again. Yet one by one, behind him, the officers still raised their hands. The paperwork had been a mistake. The respect was not.